On vacation.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. If everybody would like to stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Brill, would you call the roll?
I can do it. I'll do it for you.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Sonnett.
Mr. Terry.
Here.
Ms. Ferguson.
Here.
Mr. Reed.
Here.
And Mr. Sens.
Here.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's council meeting agenda for September 12th?
A motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Mr. Terry.
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson.
Yes.
Mr. Reed.
Yes.
Mr. Sens.
Yes.
And it was brought forth that the council meeting minutes were just added to the Dropbox. And so we will postpone the minutes from August 22nd and September 7th to the 9/26 meeting. And we do not have any visitors this evening or proclamations, so I will jump into my reports. Mr. Rucker did say that he will be a few minutes late here. So the last couple of weeks since our last meeting at the end of August and throughout the work session last week, it's kind of been meeting with the congressman for our area, for Madison and Union County. Ms. Sonnett and I drove down to London to attend and meet Congressman Mike Carey and for a meet and greet session. That was an interesting get together with all of Madison County and other elected officials, and to talk about how we can really kind of come together as a county and things that are going to be affecting us into the future. And then last Wednesday, Congressman Jim Jordan came to the municipal building, and we had staff here that was able to interact and ask questions and convey their thoughts on, what they'd like to see going forward as well. I invited the school districts to join in as well. So we had superintendents from Fairbanks, Tolles, and representative from Jonathan Alder here. So it was great to continue to work together with our school districts as well, especially as we grow. It affects their operations. Some things that I have been working on in the last couple weeks. This is Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and a young gentleman that is near and dear to my heart, that his parents went to college with me. They said, ways that people can help give back to our communities is to help donate blood. So I had a call with the Red Cross last Friday to start the process of setting up a blood drive here in Plain City. It's not as easy as I thought it was to contact the Red Cross and get that going. They are booked until January, but they're going to try to work in it because I chose to make it in honor of a little boy named Brady. So they're working at trying to get that set up here in Plain City. So I'm going to keep you guys in the loop on that, and I know that we're working with staff members to try to incentivize donating blood with some days, maybe like a half day of vacation or time off to help get that, because there is definitely a blood shortage at the moment. And then today I met with the Madison County mayors via Zoom, and we talked about Make a Difference Day for October 22nd, and we decided to kind of rally together around World Food Day, which is October 16th, and we are going to be getting a food challenge going on in our own communities to benefit our food pantries. So look for more information of how we can donate, and also encourage residents and businesses to donate to the food pantry. Food pantry items as well as monetary, because they can make that dollar stretch a little bit farther than what we can with items donated. So with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Sonnett for Finance Director and update with Village Administrator.
The administrator, nothing's new since last Wednesday meeting. The finance on the agenda is tonight's the supplemental that we discussed during the work session, the $10,000 for the park. Other than that, that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Sonnet. Chief McKee?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Officer Flowers spoke to the Plain City Elementary first grade class concerning crosswalk safety as part of the PD's outreach programs. With schools just starting and stuff, now he's getting back into those. We'll be doing that once a month for different classes. Officer Seagrass and Officer Lake participated in the Madison County Safety Expo. There was a great turnout for that this year. The police department participated in the National Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over campaign during Labor Day weekend. Made a few arrests. Jonathan Elder High School homecoming parade is scheduled for September 28th this year at 6 p.m. That'll be on Wednesday. And that's all I have this time, Mayor. Council.
Thank you, Chief. Oh, and to make sure that we vote for the Plain City Police Department in the Light Ohio Blue photo competition.
I'll send you guys all a link if the mayor hasn't already done that.
I have not yet. I can, yes.
We entered one of our vehicles, the truck that we use for our outreach programs, into a contest for one of the best looking vehicles in the state.
We're slightly behind at the moment. I think Mount Orab has the votes at the moment, so we've got to rally
I
together.
think they got their family or something.
Thank you, Chief McKee. And Mr. Terry, Council President.
We had our work session last Wednesday. We discussed the future of the Parks and Rec amongst a few other items. Our next one obviously will be in October, and I believe it is budget. Looking at this on it, I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe October is budget.
There's something else October 7th that I cannot remember.
We have a couple more meetings. So
Yeah. It's at the very beginning. I think it's a public appeal process.
the appeal, there's going to be the appeal of one of the DRB here.
Yep. Yeah. So there'll be a special meeting prior to.
Okay. Thank you for that information. Law Director?
Sure, the only thing I have tonight is on the alley vacation, so I'll just reserve my comments till we get to that topic in the agenda.
Thank you. Marketing and Communications?
I have a couple updates, but can I just say that every time anybody says an alley vacation, I think, man, I get to go on more than I do. A couple things with the Communications and Marketing Committee. We have a meeting coming up on the 20th, so next Tuesday at 6:30, I believe, is the meeting. And then this isn't officially part of the committee yet. We're going to talk about it at the next meeting, but I thought I would give an update. I have two updates related to some communication that's happening. If you've seen me maybe wandering around the village with a camera standing out in the middle of intersections and people have called, there's a guy with a pole standing in the middle of the intersection. You did get a call?
So I'm sure we will.
Okay, perfect. I am in the process of making some videos to showcase the downtown businesses or buildings that are currently, the business owners are currently actively making into something new. So it's a way to highlight Plain City's rich history that is just ripe with the sweetness of new vision. So each of the property owners is working. I'm working with those. I've had meetings with them, and we're filming their interiors and talking about the history and just exploring their vision for what they want their buildings to be without any promises, just what they are hoping they'll be. And then the other update that I have is Mayor Carney is going to start doing council update videos following each council meeting and posting those out as just a way to help communicate what's going on in more of a, you can read the minutes, but it's a little bit more engaging to have somebody talk to you about what's happening and explain the minutes and what we're doing. So those are the two things. We're not official communications marketing yet, but we're working on that. So, okay, that's it. That's
Thank
my
you,
only
Mr.
updates.
Sims.
Mayor, can I say something real quick?
Oh, yes,
Before I get
yeah.
that? Because Mr. Sins brought this up, the buildings downtown. If you guys get a chance to go into the old municipal building and look around right now, it's kind of cool. There's an old chalkboard from the school that's on the wall, and there's still drawings on there from people from 1926 and writing on that chalkboard and stuff. It's kind of cool. We're going to try to save it, but in case they don't, we kind of need to go look at it.
Well, that's definitely that's going to be part of the video and some of that history. There's also a video that's happening on the clock tower. I actually am meeting on Wednesday with David Redman, who winds the clock, and we're going to go up and have a conversation, and he's going to show me how the pennies, when they put pennies on and take pennies off to keep the pendulum spinning correctly, or it's not spinning. You know what a pendulum does.
Swinging.
There's a cool picture of an old, a woman that they, like, drew on the chalkboard or something. I think it said 1926. I think it was Renee.
Probably,
So-
yeah. You probably stand right next to me.
And these are all just hobby projects for me. These are just, I do it extra spare time. So.
But thank you, Mr. Sins, because that is something I've been talking about doing these updates after council meetings for so many months now, and you're holding my feet to the fire on it. So tomorrow I'm hoping to do a Facebook Live, and and make it a little bit more, not so just where people read it, but it kind of comes alive, and we can give some thought of why we're doing the things, what our vision is going forward and such. Thank you. BZA.
Yes, so BCA is going to be meeting on September 20th. There was a time change. We'll be meeting at 6 p.m. here in council chambers.
Thank you, Ms. Brill. Planning and zoning, we will be meeting as well on September 21st at 6:30, and that is our public hearing for the zoning code rewrite. And the village sent it out on Facebook and the app. Okay, yes. So hopefully we'll get some good feedback from that and encourage residents to attend that meeting. Parks and Recreation, Mr. Reed.
Thank you, Mayor. As Mr. Terry mentioned, last council work session, we heard from the Parks and Rec Committee and what their opinions were about vision for the parks and direction. We didn't get to talk too much about recreation opportunities, but that's just as big of, maybe arguably even bigger than the parks vision is the recreation stuff, because it can be just as expensive and just as important to the residents, what kind of recreation opportunities that the village is able to offer. So we have a meeting tomorrow night for Parks and Rec, and we'll probably be talking about the capital improvements, the CIP budget for 2023. So be prepared. The music in the park was rained out Sunday. Unfortunately, that's the third rain out we've had this year, which is doesn't set a record, but at least ties a record in my tenure. This week we have the Plain City Community Singers featured as the performance group. And some of your friends probably are in that group. So if you want to impress your friends, come out and watch and hear them sing Music in the Park at 6:30 now in September. So that's it for the Parks and Rec.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Personnel and Finance.
Yes, we are also meeting next week on the 20th at 6:30 in the Chiefs Conference Room, right? Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
I just told Renee we may change that because I think the BZA was changed to 6 o'clock, and Tom thinks it might do it by 6:15, so we might be able to meet here.
Okay.
Just an FYI.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Fire Board, Mr. Sims.
Yeah, the emergency alert system, they have the cost of the one that they want to go with, which now it just slips my mind. I forgot to write it down, but I know it. Ask me later when I remember. And they have a meeting. We're going to talk, the fire district is going to look at options on whether they're going to split the cost up with all of the entities that want to participate, or whether they're just going to cover it. It isn't a lot of money, in my opinion. $54.50 for a very robust alert system that gives access to the emergency alert system, but also would allow the village or any of the entities to have their own space that we could send out important alerts like water, boil alerts, and things like that, and actually zone it to you know, like it only affects this area or the, whatever else we need to send out an alert for, or just an update. And it would go to, people have to opt in for updates, but emergency is part of the emergency system. They're gonna discuss the different options, and we're gonna talk about that in our October meeting. The rescue truck, I was told, will be delivered next Wednesday. So the new truck will be next Wednesday. They're currently moving the old equipment over to the new truck. The FEMA grants, there's no updates on those, but those grants are the ones, if you recall, for equipment and additional staffing, 3 full-time staff. Runs are up. There were 162 runs in the month of August, which is 20% over last year and 24% over year to date. And then a last minute update, the chief just talked to me as I was driving past his house. They were awarded $45,000 for a wellness and fitness program that focuses on rehabilitation, behavioral, and yep, those are the words I wrote down. And it's a grant from the state of Ohio for the first responders wellness. So.
Thank you, Mr. Sins. Design Review Board, Mr. Rucker.
We did not have a meeting in August. We will be having one at the end of this month. Details to come.
Thank you, Mr. Rucker. Moving out of reports, I'm going to go back up real quick. You walked in late. Did you want to be a visitor this evening, or you're just in attendance? Just making sure. I don't want to ever deny someone the opportunity to come to council. So moving out of reports into our public hearing. I'd like to open the public hearing for an ordinance amending codified ordinance section 1145.02, permitted uses in the rural district to add professional office as a permitted use. Is anyone here to speak on behalf of the public hearing?
Do we even need to do an overview? Is everyone pretty comfortable with this? I'm pretty comfortable with that.
It's to allow a professional office space in the agriculture or rural district. It's pretty straightforward. If anyone doesn't have any questions or is here to speak, I would like to close the public hearing. Moving out of the public hearing into old business, second reading, resolution 17-22, a resolution authorizing the village administrator to dispose of village property no longer needed for public use. Is there a motion?
I'll motion to approve resolution 1722.
I will second.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rucker?
Yes.
Mr. Sins?
Yes.
Moving out of old business into new business, first reading ordinance 19-22, an ordinance approving a supplemental appropriation of funds and amendments to the Village of Plain City 2022 budget and declaring an emergency.
Mayor, this is a first reading, right?
Yes.
It
For
is,
this?
yes.
Okay. There's an element in the ordinance that refers to an Exhibit A attached here too, which would explain the changes in the budget, and I didn't find Exhibit A anyplace. So is there an Exhibit A that could be provided by next meeting or something?
I think the budget was in the file.
The budget was, but not.
That's
Oh, that's what you're talking about. So, all right. So in identifying what changes are in the supplemental budget, how do we do that? Because this is about changes to the budget, right?
This was an increase in $10,000 in the park and an increase in $10,000 in expense, like park revenue $10,000.
Right, and the parks account. Okay,
That's it.
right. Okay. I also noticed a new line item in the funds analysis page that's for the OPWC Gay Street activity, whatever it is. Was that something you put in, or was that something that?
I cleaned it up from when Nathan, because he did.
Yeah, it wasn't in the previous supplemental, that's the only reason I'm bringing it
It was
up.
Gay and Mabel, and I combined the two, because it's an OPWC project, and we get billed appropriately for OPWC.
Okay, so the only reason like I said, I'm bringing it up is because it wasn't in the supplemental, that line of what was it, 27.5 or something for income and 27.5 for expenses. That line wasn't in the previous supplemental. So this is like an error correction then, because it always should have been in there.
It should have been in
Right,
there, yeah,
okay,
27.5, it's 51.
I just want to clarify that. Maybe in 2023, we can get those, set up an OPWC fund in the budget and just combine them into one line item on the funds analysis, but we can discuss that for 2023.
And this is just
Okay.
for the $10,000 that we received from Mr. Converse's estate, and so it has to be.
Right, I
taken-
understand that part, but it's also for that new line item in the funds analysis page, because it changes the numbers on the funds analysis page, okay? So that's why I thought it was important to bring that up. So, yeah, other than that, I'm fine bringing that little issue up, so.
Is there a motion to waive the second reading?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Terry,
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes,
Mr. Rucker,
Yes.
Mr. Sins.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve ordinance 19-2022 as emergency?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Terry,
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
yes,
Mr. Rucker,
Yes.
Mr. Sins.
Yes.
First reading ordinance 20-22, an ordinance providing for an amendment to ordinance number 14-22 relating to the issuance and sale of the notes authorized in that ordinance and declaring an emergency.
Mayor.
I have Mr. Conley here to
Yes.
answer questions regarding and explain kind of what's going on with it. So.
Thank you, Ms. Sonnet. Yes, you may have the floor.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let me start by saying good evening. It's so nice to be in this room. It's the first chance I've had to actually speak in the new facility, so thank you for having me in. Before we talk about the amending ordinance, let me provide you just an update on the financing plan so you know just how things are progressing along and why. As it stands today, we're scheduled to sell the notes, so the $10 million note for the plant expansion and then the $1.2 million for the renewal of the extension.
Yeah.
Yes. So on Thursday, the village, so the process is this, the village will actually sell notes in the fixed income securities market. So investors will be looking at the village's financials and making a decision as to whether or not to invest in your securities that you'll be selling in the marketplace. The process is pretty simple. You start with basically it's like a bidding process, except you put a price or an interest rate on the securities. You show those securities to investors across the country, and then they bid to buy your securities based on the estimated interest rate. Hopefully, we end up with more bids than we have securities to sell, and when you do that, you lower the interest rate until you have an equilibrium that occurs where investors will start to drop off because the rate is too low, and ultimately you end up with one or two investors that buy the financing. So it's a real simple process as I describe it. Not so simple in practice when you get out in the marketplace, but that's how you do it. So we get out, and that's how we've always been able to get interest rates, low interest rates for the village. I should also say that the village has been in the market for the last 6 years now, maybe, with securities. So you're developing sort of a following, if you will. So investors across the country sort of zero in on markets and issuers of securities that they want to own their debt. You've become one of those types of issuers. There are investors that are, so to speak, hot on this marketplace. They like this part of the country. They like what's happening in Columbus. So I kind of feel like, and have a little fun with it and call them your bond groupies. So you sort of have bond groupies that follow what you're doing and they're waiting to buy your securities. And so that helps with us getting a lower interest rate. When we go into this process, Renee handles any conversations that might come from these investors. And when I talk about investors, it could be banks, it could be mutual funds that buy short-term fixed income securities from Ohio governments. But all of that will happen Thursday morning. And so what we're selling will be 250. 11,250, 1-year note. So it's a 1-year financing. And so that's been sort of our financing plan over time. So when you borrow on a 1-year basis, it gives the village the opportunity to make adjustments over time. So when you get to the end of the year, you can pay the note down if we have more cash on hand, which is what we've been doing for the last several years. It also gives us the ability to figure out how much a project might cost. So with the expansion, we don't have actual bids yet. So we don't know for sure if the project will be $9 million, $9.5 million, or $10 million, which is one of the reasons you start with a note issue. It's sort of like a construction loan when you build a house. And once we get the bids in, if it turns out the project is less than $10 million, we'll pay off the balance of the notes at the end of the year when the notes come due. And so that's sort of the strategy. Once we get through the construction of the project, then is the time that we'll actually look at converting the short-term financing into a permanent financing, again, much like you would for your home. But under Ohio law, before a village or any municipality can authorize the issuance of a short-term financing, you have to establish the terms of the long-term financing a year in advance, or maybe 2 years in advance. So the ordinance that you're amending today is the ordinance that sets the terms for the long-term financing, which we have no idea what that will look like next year or the year after. The language that's in there is designed to create kind of an estimate on what the term of the financing will be and what the interest rate will be. So we're guessing. But by law, you have to create sort of a not to exceed scenario so that your taxpayers can't be charged outrageous costs associated with the financing. The original ordinance had a 20-year term for the financing, for the long-term financing. How that got in there, we don't know, but 20 years is not a reasonable term to pay back a sewer plant expansion. It's usually 30 to 40 years. Ohio law allows you to go 40 years. I asked the attorney to change it from 20 to 40 years so that we could have maximum flexibility at the time that we decide to go to long-term financing. The reason we need the flexibility is twofold. The first is today, we don't know what interest rates will be next year or the year after. I changed the interest rate to 5%. It was 6%. Today, if we were doing a 30-year financing, it would be about 4.25%, but we're kind of have a buffer in there. But in the event interest rates are 6%, or 7%, it's going to be nice to have the flexibility to stretch it out to 40 years instead of 30 years, and definitely not 20 years. So the amendment tonight is for you to change that so we have the flexibility to go to 40 years if we need it to go to 40 years. I don't think we will, but that's the primary purpose. I adjusted the interest rate as well to be a little more realistic. There was 6% in the ordinance last time. We don't need 6% to sell bonds. At least today. Who knows what happens in the future? So basically, that's what we're looking at. So you've got a resolution to amend the terms of the bonds, which won't be issued for some time. Without the amendment, I can't sell the notes on Thursday. Well, I could, but we'll be stuck with a 20-year term for a future bond issue, which wouldn't be in our best interest. So that's the big picture. Any questions about any of that?
I just had one question. Just do you have, and maybe I'm using the term wrong here, but do we have our current bond rating? Do we know what our current bond rating is?
We're A1. We're Moody's A1. Yeah, and we did get a rating for the note issue that we're selling on Thursday. In the past, the village has never really needed a note rating because our note issues have been fairly small. But now we're looking at a note issue that's over $10 million. And what a rating, is everyone familiar with that phrase? Yeah. Think of it as a credit score, like your own personal credit score. The better your rating or your credit score, the lower your interest rate is. So with securities, though, you have to actually go to a rating agency and ask them to assign a score to your credit quality. So in the past, our long-term debt has been rated by Moody's as an A1, which is a very good rating. And we continue to maintain that rating over time. Once a year, Renee and I have a fun conversation with a rating agency that wants to know what's going on here. And so what you all may not be aware of is that investors, rating agencies that are in New York, Chicago, across the country are aware of Plain City. They know what's happening in Plain City. They're keeping a very close eye on what's going on in Plain City. And so we have an obligation by law to continue to update them on your financial condition, to update on our income tax collections, to update them on what has happened to the village since COVID has set in. So there's an ongoing relationship that we have in maintaining information and updating information to investors. With the note issue, because we've now moved into a category of issuer that's, you're no longer a small town, so to speak. Once you move into issuing debt of $10 million or greater, the marketplace sees you slightly differently. So they expect you to have a rating on your short-term debt as well as your long-term debt. So we applied for a rating through a state program that's called the Ohio Municipal Market Access Program. The program is designed to let you sell notes backed by the state of Ohio's credit, which is a really nice program. We get the state credit rating as opposed to your own credit rating. And we pay just a nominal fee to the state for that service. So this particular note issue will have the state rating on it because of the program. And that allows pretty much any investor, large or small, to buy your short-term note with some confidence that it'll be paid back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you didn't think we were going to need 40 years. What did you mean by that? Because that's what we're authorizing in the ordinance.
You're authorizing a maximum.
A maximum, so
not
what do
to
you think the
exceed.
number is going to be?
It's hard to say at this point, but more than likely 30 years. Typically,
30 years, okay.
utility facilities like water, sewer are usually 30-year financings. On some occasions, if you guys are familiar with the USDA, they offer low interest or zero interest loans to smaller communities. That program is a 40-year financing program. So to the extent we can secure financing through the USDA, that would be 40 years at 1% or 2% or even 0%. I wouldn't want to prohibit us from being able to go 40 years.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, my issue or my problem that I'm trying to work through with this, let me ask you this question first.
Yeah.
Once the bonds are issued, let's say, and the years are set then, right, when you issue them?
Yes, the repayment term?
Right.
Right.
They're a
That's
30-year bond then at that point,
that's correct.
right? So when which would be tomorrow, you're gonna know if it's.
Oh, no, you mean on Thursday, that will be a 1 year.
1 year, no, okay.
Yeah, that's a
So-
one. So think of it again so if you were building a home,
Right.
you would get a construction loan. And so this is really sort of your construction
Okay,
loan.
I got that.
Yeah.
So discussions will take place of what's required for the payoff term for these. And I'll go back to the issue, the problem I'm having is that there is a very good chance we will not need this sewer plant expansion after 5 years. So, because of other options that we're gonna do. I mean, this is just gonna be trash then in 5 years, possibly. Okay, so where am I going wrong with this analysis? If we go to the regionalization, then they're gonna do the sewage and the water. So why do we need to expand the sewer plant after we get into regionalization?
So I don't know if our bond person maybe is the right person to answer that question, but I can shed a little light on that. And it's pretty premature to talk about anything along the 6119. However, if we did go down any sort of 6119, any facilities we would have would be probably included in that. So it's not that this would go to, it's not like we're improving something that would go away. They would actually leverage our capacity and our usage in their models to ensure that they have the ability to service all of the communities that they're serving as they make any decisions about potentially building a different plant or expanding a plant.
Okay.
So I would be hesitant to ever say that we won't need this, because one, that is very premature, and second, even if we as Plain City Village and the service area and whatever organization is serving that area would utilize this facility.
Okay, see, when we have these discussions, just like a bushel of questions come up, and you're kind of conjecturing, and I appreciate that input. One of the other possibilities is that they won't use it. And we've invested $10 million in a facility that we're only going to use for 5 years.
So it
But
would
we're
be a pre-qualification of any sort of agreement that at least this council member would be a part of. We wouldn't sign up for or go into an agreement that didn't have that as a prerequisite as part of the agreement.
That they would buy the.
Well, it would probably be a transferring, because we'd also transfer the debt along with it, would actually be how it would operate and work. Again, it's a little premature, but just to be very clear, as any sort of prerequisite, this council would never turn over and say, I want to join the 6119, which will be our choice, but I want to retain this debt of the sewer plant. Clearly, I would also make sure as part of a prerequisite that they take on the facility and the debt that is a part of that.
Okay, so that hasn't been mentioned before. I appreciate that input. I hope other council members share that opinion, that we would not carry the debt
Mr.
beyond.
Reed, that has been said in our
Multiple times,
multiple times
It's come up.
multiple times.
about the transfer of debt.
Oh, well, okay, the part that I heard, maybe I didn't hear what you heard, was that the Plain City Village wouldn't incur debt that's part of the regionalization, okay? I didn't hear, was it, that was said, right?
So just to be clear, any sort of debt on any sort of water or sewer facilities, if we went down this path, would be under the 6119. They would not be under the Village of Plain City. However, the Village of Plain City and the residents would be the key members of this 6119, and we would be on this board. So it's a little left hand, right hand, but the concern that you're saying of, I spend money, I build this expansion, and that goes to waste, is not a risk that actually exists. And that's what I'm trying to, I'm not saying we won't have debt, the village won't, but the taxpayers, you know, as users of the 6119 would. So what would happen is that would all transfer over, and they might refinance, they might take the exact notes we have. But that really, at that point, is up to the 6119, and it's no longer under the purview of the Village of Plain City.
Right, okay, if I can believe, and I do, that the debt associated with this $10 million will go to the 6119 once it's implemented.
If we
Okay.
engage in a 6119.
And then I can do this. I just want to put it on the table, though. This is, I'm not sure how the village is not going to get stuck with its large amount of share of debt, because that's going to come back to the users of the water in fee increases. Okay, so the $10 million is fine if they're going to take it on, or if they don't use it, they just take on the debt.
If they don't, we would retain. If we did not turn over our facility, we would also not turn over the debt, and then there wouldn't be a 6119.
Right.
most
No, I'm
likely,
just saying in the event
and
there
we
is
would just operate as
if
status
there is
quo,
if
which,
there is
which we should always be, because things, as I pointed out, it's a little premature to go down that path. We should always be evaluating the situation as if this is just the Village of Plain City, and this is going to be most likely a 30-year note at around a 5 or under interest rate for our sewer plant expansion, which will reach to the, I'm gonna mess up the gallons per day, but that amount of gallons per day, which is about double what we have now, that has been gone through all the public hearings with the EPA. That in itself is really how we should evaluate this. If we make the decision to enter a 6119, a prerequisite of that would be they take the debt along with the facility to that program.
Right, okay, I understand that part. My concern going forward is that the concept of transferring all our debt and not incurring any new debt from the 6119 is fine. That sounds really good, except that the water users in Plain City are gonna have to pay that with their water fees. Okay, there's no magic bullet here. The debt doesn't disappear into the air. It's gonna go to 6119. They're gonna have to pay it. They pay it by charging water fees and sewer fees. And they're gonna charge that to the village residents. I don't wanna debate that issue. It's like straightforward. It's a no-brainer that that's gonna happen. But when we get to the point of getting into the 6119, we need to know what that water fee increase is gonna be and which of our residents are gonna pay it. Are some residents gonna be grandfathered in and not have to incur a large fee because it doesn't benefit them? And we're going into this whole thing to benefit new residents, so maybe they should incur all those fee increases. That's an issue for the 6119, but I just wanted to put that out there for your consideration. So, thank you for your patience.
No, I don't mind. I mean, your questions are valid questions, and providing some answers is really important. So some of the key things that I want to kind of touch base. The first and most important thing is that there are no assurances right now that you guys will enter into a regional utility district. So that's the first thing. But one thing for certain is that you do have to expand the sewer plant. So you have to address that issue on its face without thinking about what happens with regionalization.
Okay,
Second,
I'm sorry. Let me ask this then, because the maximum we can have is 1,500 gallons a day, right?
I have no idea what the.
Okay, that's the maximum. It was originally set out to be 1,500, and then administration reduced it to 1,000.
It's 1 million.
Oh,
1 million.
yeah, right, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The 1,500 stuck in my mind. It's 1.5 million gallons a day.
I think I used that at my house.
And it was reduced to $1 million for this project. So if we don't go through the 6119, then we're gonna need the 1.5 million, okay? That's a given. So how does this impact the $10 million? Would we need more money then to further expand it to the 500,000?
Right, as the village continues to grow, so if you bear with me, you try to answer the question you have before you ask me the next question.
Yeah.
So the village is growing, right? And so when you provide services in a rapidly growing community, you have to segment your growth for the services you provide. So it would be nice to be able to build a plant that would serve a city of 15 or 20,000 people, but we're not there yet. So you segment your growth by building a segment of the plant, which is what you're doing now, that will serve people, most of which will be paying, the new homes that are being constructed will be paying tap fees to help pay, to offset the cost of the expansion. So your question about, will the cost of this be pushed off onto existing residents? Most of the cost of this will be passed on to new residents that are coming in and tapping into the system. So I want to make sure that we don't send people running into the streets screaming, oh my God, my water and sewer rates are going up. So we will be capturing the costs of this expansion from new people that are moving in from their tap fees. But then as the community grows, if there isn't regionalization, then you would then move on into another segment of expansion with the plant, right? And you grow as the community grows so that you don't take on a lot of debt all at once. And, you know, in every city in central Ohio has done this. Dublin has done it, Delaware has done it. I mean, I've worked with most of the cities around here. So it's you're not the first to go through this. You know, and you've had some really good communities to learn from in this process, so it's kind of hard for me to hear you when I'm talking.
I'm hearing you, but
I couldn't hear what you said because I was...
Right, no, these I appreciate you can't answer all the questions, you know, today, but the questions are not going to go away and they need to be answered.
Yeah.
So when do we have to start paying on these bonds?
So the note issue is a 1-year financing. You guys can pay principal and interest at your choice next year. So you don't.
So next year, there has to be a budget item for, let's say, if it's 40
And
years. we
a
have to
minimum
have-
budget item could be just the interest expense on that. Under Ohio law, you can go 3 years and only pay interest.
Okay,
At-
that
as
still
your
would
choice.
be an amount approximating $500,000 in the budget?
No, it would be, so I'm estimating the interest rate on this to be around 3.5%. So it'd be about
Okay, well, it's
350,000.
authorized for 5, so.
Right, but we're borrowing. So again, every time we borrow, we create a not to exceed number.
Right.
And then I'm
okay.
here tonight to tell you that the interest rate that we expect to see on Thursday will be more like 3.25 to
So what would
3.5%.
that would be, $350,000 to $400,000
$350,000.
out of, that would have to, the budget would have to account for that
Mhm.
starting next year.
That's correct.
Okay, and every year following, and if we
As long
don't
as
pay
the
principal,
principal stays at $10
if
million.
we don't pay principal,
Mhm.
there's gonna be a balloon payment sometime.
No. So the way the process works, first let me go back to how you're paying for the interest. So I want to make sure, because I can do this all night with you. So the interest is not being paid from your general revenues, it's being paid from tap fees. So you have a revenue source coming into the village to pay the interest on these notes. It is not costing and driving up the cost of your budget to operate the village. Are we clear?
Oh, no, we're not,
Okay.
because it's a surprise to me that tap fees are gonna cover the cost of this note, is that what you're saying?
I am.
Mr. Reed,
Who's paying, this is a huge
the
amount of money.
developers,
Pardon me?
the developers, they have to pay the village tap fees for
They
every
do, but this
home.
one, there's not enough money we received in the tap fees in the past to cover the cost of this note. It's just, the money hasn't been there for that. And I'm not sure, that's gonna escalate the tap fees significantly. The developer's gonna have to pay.
That's
See, this is what I don't
That's
see. I
correct.
don't see all the numbers here and have all the, where the money's coming from. How are we gonna pay this? Okay, so I have over here, the gentleman saying it's not gonna come out of the budget, okay? It's magically gonna come from somewhere, but if we don't
I want
have,
to correct you, it's not magic.
well, if
Okay,
we don't have
no.
developers
I
that
need to
year.
be clear about this because the
Uh-huh.
public is listening to what you're saying. The
I
press is writing down what you're saying. This
Okay,
isn't magic.
right,
This isn't magic. There are developers build homes. In order to build homes, they have to provide water and sewer to the homes that are being constructed.
got it,
The village charges them a fee
right.
every time they build a home. Those fees come to the village and we use those fees to pay for the new services that are being provided to those residents.
Uh-huh.
It isn't magic.
Right, but you're talking $10 million in tap fees. And so what if
Over a
we don't
period of
have the
time, yes.
development activity that we've had this year? Who's gonna pay
You
it then?
can't look at this year, you have to look at the future, what's in the queue.
Right, that's what I'm saying. What if a couple of years in a row, we don't have new developments going up? Where are those tap fees gonna come from?
We have them accounted for. Mr. Reed, I have an idea of, that might, help out with Mr. Conley and Ms. Sonnet, is to create a flow chart or something that would explain the tap fees to the,
It's just a
option.
number, and if, I just wanna know where the money's coming from to pay the tap fees. If they don't come, if the tap fees aren't there, and it's arguable that the tap fees might not be there, that you're anticipating, because you need development to get tap fees.
we
Right.
have the neighborhoods that are.
So I think what the mayor's pointing out is that trying to walk all the way through this right now may be a fool's errand. And at the end of the day, we are trying to get, I would like to be able to answer all these questions, and I feel as if they have been answered. But I will say it very clearly that if we don't expand our sewer plant, we won't have any tap fees, and we are currently at capacity with homes to be PTI.
Got
So
it.
there isn't really a direct alternative at this stage in the game that I really think is a reasonable approach at this time.
I'm not saying not to do the work. I'm just wanting to know how it's gonna be paid for. That's a legitimate question, okay? This is $350,000 to $400,000 a year that if the tap fees, if you have $350,000 to $400,000 in tap fees every year, then fine. It's gonna go into the budget and it's gonna go out to pay the interest on the notes, the bonds. If you don't have tap fees that year, or for a couple of years, then you need $350,000 to $400,000 to come out of the budget. Am I wrong with that?
If you don't have the revenue coming
If we don't have
from the tap
development
fees,
that year, we're gonna come up with the money.
So,
Ms. Sonnet, can you?
So Darby Station, one development, 700 taps out there. If they were to pay just sewer, and I'm not talking about water or anything else, that's 6.3 million at build out. At build out,
Okay,
just for Darby Station. Now,
right.
Madison Meadows is already paid, but then you have a couple other subdivisions that are on the table, so to speak,
Right,
pending the PTI that the EPA will release.
okay. All right, and I just want to understand that this is a risk, that $6.5 million is fine, that'll pay that'll pay the interest for a few years. 30 years, or 40 years, I know this number, 40 years out, you need $23.5 million. $6 million doesn't get close, well, it gets part of
if I
that.
have $6 million, I'm going to retire a significant portion of these notes,
Yes.
and I'm not gonna have this.
Okay, that was one of my other questions, can you retire the
Well,
can you retire the notes?
Yeah, he said that.
Clearly, that's what-
In his original possession. Had you been listening, instead of trying to think up more inane questions to ask, you would have remembered, or you would have caught him saying that.
So I think we're at a
I
point.
don't believe he said that you could retire the notes.
He
But-
absolutely said it.
Okay, well, all right.
You
then.
should listen to what people are saying instead of trying to think up what you can ask next.
I'm gonna ignore your rudeness, Mr. Rocker,
I
and treat you
think
like a reasonable human being,
We
but,
need to keep moving
I'm not feeling
on.
very reasonable right now.
and you're acting like it also. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
Mr. Reed, Mr. Reed, we're going to stop here with our meeting at the moment. We're going to continue with our first reading of Ordinance 20-2022
So I
and
think-
giving Mr. Conley the time.
It has to be passed as an emergency.
Yeah, so I think we need, so I wanna make sure that we're all understanding what this is and what this isn't. And at this point, I think I understand that there are some other questions about other pieces of this, but of this piece, this just gets us to Thursday. So I don't want anything to get in the way of getting us to Thursday. So before we call a motion or anything, Mr. Reed, are you comfortable with getting us to the 1 year note issuance
Hey.
and the ordinance changing to the 1 year?
I appreciate people taking the time to answer the questions that I have, even though they've probably all been answered before. I'm gonna trust that people just understand that you're taking on a financial obligation where the cash flow stream is not guaranteed to pay these off, okay? That's a fact. I will go ahead and support the motion and get behind it. For, just to keep things moving forward. I understand we have to do it. We don't really have a choice. I just wanted people to understand what you're taking on as risk and to see how we're gonna pay it off and what it's gonna do to the budget if the tap fees aren't there. So having said that, then let's just go ahead and move the
Motion
business.
to waive second reading on ordinance 2022.
Motion to waive second reading on ordinance 2022.
Is that second, and Mr. Sins?
Oh, you motioned it.
Yes,
I
he
thought you were
motioned.
asking for a motion,
No,
sorry.
he,
I just wanted to repeat you.
It was fair. You did it just fair.
Mr. Terry,
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
Yes,
Mr. Rucker,
Yes.
Mr. Sins.
Yes.
Motion to pass ordinance 2022 as and declaring an emergency.
Second. Go ahead.
Mr. Terry,
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson,
Yes.
Mr. Reed,
yes.
Mr. Rucker,
Yes.
Mr. Sins.
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Conley. First reading ordinance 21-2022, an ordinance amending codified ordinance section 1145.02, permitted uses in the rural, RU rural district to add professional office as a permitted use and declaring an emergency.
Motion to waive second reading on ordinance 21-2022.
Second.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rucker?
Yes.
Mr. Sins?
Yes.
Motion to approve ordinance 21-2022 and declaring an emergency.
Second.
Mr. Terry?
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Mr. Rucker?
Yes.
Mr. Sins?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion approved. Moving on first, or new business into discussion items, we have the Medici Troyer Alley vacation. Would you like to give an update?
Sure, I know we talked about this a little at the work session, but for this specific alley vacation, Mr. Lafayette mentioned doing an easement between both of the parties, because I believe the village would like to keep this open as a public right of way. Is that correct? Like a pedestrian?
The main focus is we would like, and I think Mr. Lafayette understands this, that we would like to always have public access to that alley, not by vehicle, but by pedestrian right of way.
Sure, so Mr. Lafayette thinks the best way to do that would be to do an easement, which would be between the current property owners and the village. Then the easement, after it's signed, would get recorded. And that would protect the village from here into the future for any subsequent property owners. If the property gets transferred, it will always have to be kept open as a pedestrian right of way.
So how do we adopt a easement? Is it an ordinance or a resolution that we actually codify? Is it something that comes out?
So typically what's done is the council would approve the easement and authorize someone to sign, usually the mayor or council president, but that is done by a motion when it's time to sign it.
Okay.
So I don't think anything needs to be done today, but we just wanted to give you an update.
Is this like a deed restriction then?
Same type of concept,
Right,
yes,
okay.
but an easement is a separate type of legal
So it
document.
goes with the deed? then,
Correct.
for
So
sure. It's
if these
attached, right?
property owners were to transfer it in the future, just like buying a home, it goes to a title agency, and an easement gets kind of like tripped up in your title search, and it would be a restriction for all future property owners.
So without objection, I believe that the conversation has been that this is how we'd like to proceed. We are comfortable with proceeding this way. I guess we would instruct the village solicitor's office to go ahead and draft up a easement, make sure it's amenable to the building owner, both Mr. Troyer and Mr. Medici, and bring us something reasonable to approve. And I think that's really where I could kind of finish it tonight.
The only other thing I have to add is that we have to get a survey done, which will survey the actual area that's going to be open as a right of way, and that is going to be recorded with the easement. Mr. Lafayette mentioned, maybe those costs could be split between the village and the property owner, because it does benefit both parties,
Great.
including the village,
Yeah.
so.
And I think a lot of us have spoken with Mr. Troyer and Mr. Medici. They just want to get this resolved, I think, in a positive manner. I don't think there's any sort of, they're happy that we're willing to vacate the alley, but they have no problem. I've talked to Mr. Troyer about that. He has no problem giving the easement. He said, actually, I'm glad you're doing that. So if I don't own this property in the future, it's not an issue I have to worry about for anyone else. So I think that's perfect. So yeah, if you guys, as the law director's office, could do that, that'd be great.
Yes, thank
That's all
you
I
so
have.
much. We do not have an executive session this evening, and that concludes our discussion items. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.